Listeners of the Randomness of Nothing podcast, this is Rashad Woods again, back with a really great guest today. We're talking about variety, careers, and the most important thing that I have with this show is fascinating guests who have made career pivots. Even after their passion has ended, they find that second act to really find their passion after they've completed a successful journey in life. Jenny White, retired nurse, brain tumor survivor, current author of some really interesting books that she's going to tell us about on this episode today. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Thank you. It's an honor. You've made a very interesting career pivot, and it's always a fascinating story for me when people make, that second act in life. You're a nurse, retired for years, and then you became from being the healer to the patient, and then you found another act as an author. So let's talk about that journey if we can.
Sure. It was a journey that was quite unexpected, actually. So, like you said, I'd been a nurse for over 30 years. I'd done my thing in a variety of settings and helped people, and went from being a floor nurse to a director of nursing departments. And I retired, and I was really enjoying my retirement, doing the things that people do, and I was traveling and having a great time. And then I wasn't feeling well one day, and I ended up in hospital and thought maybe I might be having a stroke.
Oh my goodness.
And they said to me, well, the good news is you're not having a stroke. The bad news is you have a brain tumor.
Those are both bad.
With brain tumors, yeah, it's a bit of a shock.
Yes.
So with brain tumors, real estate is everything, right? And of course, mine was in the worst possible place it could be.
Oh my goodness.
And it required surgery, or it was going to kill me. So that choice wasn't really much of a choice.
Yeah.
Having had the surgery, I had a coma, which was also unexpected. And I woke up and realized that most of my memories were gone.
Okay.
I didn't recognize the man at the end of the bed who was my husband.
That's horrible.
And I had to relearn how to walk and talk again. So it was a bit of a shocker.
Yeah.
I remember lying there thinking, okay, Houston, we have a problem.
Of course. I say this respectfully for, as in your field, oftentimes you're the consoling voice, or you're trying to, talk to family members. And then we all have health issues that will eventually, come up to us. Is it, I don't want to get too personal, but on the other side of that, now, are you doing your research on your end because you've had such a long career in the medical field? Obviously you're going through what you're going through, but did you go into research mode right away?
Yeah, actually I did. And I was a bit freaked out because when I was in the hospital, they took my phone away. So I couldn't even start, as soon as they said the word brain tumor, I thought, better start looking things up.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, nurses in general know too much. So when they started talking about where the brain tumor was, and I was thinking, oh man, this is not good. It was basically wrapped around a major artery that was going up into my brain. And if it cut that artery off, it was going to kill me. So I knew it was bad. I knew that I could potentially die during the surgery. And so, you do those things that nobody really wants to talk about, like write your obituary and make your funeral plans and talk to your family and all of those kinds of things.
Oh my gosh. And that, sometimes we live day to day and, we don't actually ever think that something like that's going to happen to us, and for listeners of the show, that's a delicate topic because unfortunately that's part of the bargain that we signed up for when we live, right? And none of us are going to get out of it. And a health crisis can spring upon us any moment. Now, thank goodness that we're talking to you, obviously, because you clearly got yourself out of that situation. I'm very grateful for that for you. In your years in the medical field, after you managed to go through those challenges, what eventually made you start going into authorship and children's books and medical thrillers, which I'm really excited to hear about?
Yeah, so it was actually my speech therapist who was working with me at the time, because at the time that they started working with me, I was still not verbally expressing myself well. What was coming out of my mouth, I thought were words, but really were just sounds.
Okay.
So we had to find a way to rewire my brain to get my language skills back.
Okay.
So he suggested that I start trying to write words down, and that's how it all started.
Oh,
So I could write words, and they were correct.
yeah,
I couldn't say them.
right.
So I started writing out feelings. I started writing out things that I would remember. And as I started writing, that's what triggered the memories to start coming back.
That's
So
amazing.
my journey into authorship is I started with the kids' books
Mhm,
because they were simple stories and I was lying in bed, relaxing and recovering and resting.
mhm,
And I had all these little stories coming back through my mind, thinking, yeah, like I'm just going to recreate myself as a child and I'm
mhm.
just going to let my imagination run wild.
Yeah,
And so I allowed myself the privilege of dreaming. You know how when we're kids, we dream all kinds of dreams
of
and we,
course.
we create stories?
Of course.
Well, as we get older, we're told, okay, stop that. There's a process here. You
Yes,
go to
yes.
school,
Yeah.
you get an education, you get a job, you buy a house,
Yeah.
you have kids,
Mhm.
all of that. Well, I went back into my 5-year-old self and I just thought, I got a clean slate here.
Yeah.
What would I love to do?
Yeah.
So that's where the children's books came from.
Mhm.
Now, the medical thrillers came a little bit later.
Mhm.
I thought to myself, I really should just write down what happened to me
Mhm.
and what I remember. And that was how the book started. Now, the
Yeah.
book went through like 10 different drafts
Oh my goodness.
and it evolved into fiction. But I used my own memories and my own story of being a nurse,
Mhm.
and I created the protagonist in the book, The
Mhm.
Triggering Scent, as a nurse who also had brain surgery. Now, she had some complications that I did not have,
Correct.
and I created a story of her going back to work in her happy place, which was an ICU,
Mhm.
and all of the challenges that I personally was facing, I put into the character.
Right.
So she was having challenges with memory. She was having challenges with doubt.
Mhm.
She was having to reinvent a relationship with her spouse.
Mhm.
So I kind of um, healed through creating this story.
That is beautiful. And what was interesting to me about that was I noticed you said, oftentimes a lot of medical thrillers are written from the doctor's perspective, right? More of the administrative area, more of the, not from the, I don't want to say this disrespectfully, but from the front line, so to speak, where they're there in the thick of things. And so I thought that was interesting because I was like, you know what? Actually, that's pretty accurate because you don't hear about it many times from a nurse's perspective.
Exactly. There are very few nurses who write books. And we have a very different perspective
Hmm.
than doctors. I mean, when you think about how we're trained differently. Doctors are trained to figure out problems and come up with solutions to the problems,
Hmm.
right? You break a bone, how are we going to fix it?
Yeah.
Nurses, on the other hand, were trained to understand that process,
Hmm.
but we're trained to look at the person as a whole being.
Right.
A person with emotions, a person with fears,
Hmm.
a person with doubts,
Right.
a person with the need to feel valued, and we nurture that side of them, and we help their families work with them to get better.
Right. Right.
We're also the ones at the bedside often that are holding their hands as they pass away.
For sure.
And, you get a very different perspective,
Right.
or you look at things with a different lens than
Yeah.
doctors do.
Yeah.
And that shapes who you are.
Without spoiling the plot for the listeners, because obviously they need to purchase the book and support you, I thought the nuances that you added in there that involve, personality characteristics of yourself while adding I don't want to say the typical, but the nice twist to keep the intrigue author involved. That would be on the thriller side of it. I thought was very fascinating because I was like, oh man, that's a really plot twist that I didn't see, and it's not telling, it's not giving the secret ending to the Sixth Sense here, but it was interesting the layer you added on top of that.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons I put this setting in the intensive care unit versus the ER, which is where the majority of like TV shows and movies and things happen
Hmm.
because it's so active. Well, what people don't realize is that intensive care units are equally traumatic and equally busy and
Oh, sure.
complex and challenging.
For sure.
And it may not be the same speed as an ER. Of course, in a TV show that they double or triple the timeline
Of
of
course.
things happening.
Right.
But in an ICU, a nurse is, basically 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 with people who are ventilated, who are critically
Oh,
ill,
mhm.
who require intense monitoring. Um, s- Nurses noticing the subtle differences in what's happening and seeking out, doctor's orders to make things right. They're
Mhm.
the advocates for those patients who can't speak for themselves,
Right.
and they're highly skilled and highly trained, and they're such a valuable resource that people don't realize.
And the other thing about it is too is like you're dealing with people's lives, so the amount of tension, you're not shipping potato chips and snacks. And I've had a guest who does exactly just that. So please don't get offended from that. But having said that, when you're talking about life and death, it certainly is at the top of the list of all things. And then the hours that people work, through this field. I don't think people realize the shifts, the times, the hours, and they still have to be on their A game, so to speak, when it comes to attention to detail. And sometimes that gets forgotten when they go from a patient to another patient to reading records, and they have to be accurate the entire time while doing this and be alert.
Exactly. And I tried to incorporate some of the key challenges in healthcare right now into
Yeah,
my books.
right,
So, for example, I show the characters struggling with fatigue
right.
because they're working overtime.
Hmm.
They're exhausted all the time. Being on your feet for 12 hours a day, uh, you know, all the time
Right,
is really exhausting.
yeah,
And people don't realize that sometimes there are days when it's so busy and you can't walk away from your patient's bedside
right,
to go to the bathroom,
yeah,
to go and have lunch.
yeah.
Those kinds of things are actually considered a luxury in intensive care units.
Well, and the
And
other, I'm sorry.
being short staffed
Oh my gosh.
is incredibly stressful. And I think it's important that we bring to the surface some of the challenges that healthcare workers are experiencing and create some discussion
Right.
around what can we do better.
Right. And I think, what's even what adds on the layer on top of it, on top of all those things, is you have family members who, it's one thing to not get on your plane on time because you can navigate those tricky waters, or be stuck in traffic, so to speak. But when you're dealing with the relatives, loved ones, all that raw emotion comes out, right? Every single possible personality and how they feel, what they've been going through, that gets put on you on top of that, on top of whatever a person has in their personal life, and I'm sure your book, if you're talking about stress, the hours, the profession, it all gets layered on top of that. And that person can break, under those circumstances.
Yes. And, drug abuse in healthcare is not uncommon. And I mean, that's a frightening thing to say when you think about it,
Right.
but it is a reality. And it's because the expectation is that doctors and nurses and all of the medical staff have to be on top of their game all the time.
Right.
So fatigue isn't an option. And sometimes they find ways to keep going.
Yeah.
So it's not uncommon
Oh my gosh.
to have people, addicted to medications,
Yeah.
whatever they may be.
Right. It's really sad. That's a tough one. How did you? So when you're writing this book, and are you drawing inspirations from what you see? Obviously, this sounds like a great series or a movie, to be quite honest with you. With all the streaming platforms out there, I hope somebody's listening who wants to turn this into a series. But you have quite a few books that are upcoming as well too. Like I said, The Triggering Scent, for people who haven't listened, that's the title of this book. It's out now, correct?
Yes, it's my debut
Yeah.
book, and it is available everywhere.
I love that title, by the way. I think it's one of the more fascinating titles, and then even the background of it stands out to me because it makes it, the human body and the X-ray on top of it. I thought that was really fascinating. Now, when it comes to the upcoming books, what else is coming down the pipeline for books as well too for you?
So my second book, which is called Terror at the Manor, it's going to be out later this year. It's
Mm-hmm.
and its final review at the publisher right now, so it will get published, probably in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues with Abby, the protagonist, going into a different setting, one that
Oh wow.
I worked in as well, and that's the setting of a nursing home or long-term care here in Ontario.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different challenges that happen in long-term care that people, again, should have on their radar
Yep.
for discussion and challenges that we need to overcome.
Yeah. I think
And
anybody
then
who's
I've
yeah.
got a go ahead. I was going to say I have the third book that I'm writing right now,
Yeah.
and that one deals with the unregulated body parts industry.
Oh my gosh. I,
Yes.
oh my. Can you expand on that? Because I apologize for interrupting. But that third one just completely almost made me like
No,
freeze in my
that's
seat.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, particularly in the United States of America, um, each state is different, and um, when you pass away and you donate your body to science,
Mhm.
you basically hand over your body for use, and it can be used in a variety of different ways. Some that would make you just shake your head, and others for the advancement of science. So I know when my father once said he had dementia, and we had talked when he was early diagnosed, and he said he wanted to donate his brain to science. And so I looked into it. And sure enough, different countries have different rules,
Yeah.
but when you donate your body, you really don't have control of where it goes or how they use it.
Oh my gosh.
And
No.
so there are brokers, body brokers out there in our countries, and their job is to
Buy
find
and
body
sell.
parts so that, yeah. So there's, and body parts are used in different ways. So just as an example, so medical students, of course,
Of course.
take anatomy and they use body parts to learn anatomy, which is a perfectly valid thing to do. Companies who create technology for surgeons, they use body parts to train surgeons on how to use their equipment, which again is totally legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
There are um, there are some body parts that are used, and the military use them to test different explosives and that
Right.
kind of thing. So there's that.
Right.
There's body farms where bodies are buried and then they are studied for their decomposition, and you know when bugs appear and when larvae appear, so that allows forensic science to date when the body passed.
Yeah.
But then there are less than what I would call appropriate uses that body parts are used for, and that's what I'm going to be incorporating into the book.
And for people who are listening, obviously, the medical advancement in sciences were done as long as there's proper channels and proper sign-offs from people, proper legal agreements, proper compensation, etc. And for people, immediately when you said this, I thought of Henrietta Lacks, right? Like anybody who knows the medical industry will none they used her double helix when she was dying, right? And it's cured a plethora of diseases. And pharmaceutical companies at the time, the woman was African American on top of that, so her family really didn't have any rights. And then the family finally got compensation 60 years later from all the money that they utilized from her cells, because they survived for that long, and they cured cancer, they cured a variety of different diseases. And it's still probably less than what the family was owed because of what they actually, but at some point they had to settle, and I'm glad they got taken care of in that regard.
Yeah. When I was thinking about that, I came to the conclusion that really we're spirits having a human experience, which means that the bodies that we're in are basically just like packaging,
Mm,
right? It's all about our spirit. So when you consider that, and you consider that you're not really the physical being, you
right.
can kind of understand why the industry has taken over body parts.
You're a packaged product. That's what you are. You're a packaged product, right? And
Yeah.
it's kind of scary because even when you're doing like people who have the most innocent of transactions, like a 23andMe, finding your lineage, I don't do that because I'm like, okay, what are you setting this up for as regards on the back end of this, right? You don't know if who that could be a broker that gets it to a less than stellar employee who's willing to say, hey, this is this demographic of people who live here who have X, Y, and Z. You just don't know. You generally have no idea.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know,
So I think that's a pretty good medical thriller, don't you?
Oh yeah, that's here's the bad part about it is that there's going to be one person out there that's going to be like, that's a really cool made up story. You're going to be like, listen, it's not. It really happens because there's this world that you see where you drive past the grocery store and you drop your kids off at school, and then there's the underbelly of it all that happens every single day. And if people can buy and sell
That's
real
right.
estate, they will buy and sell body parts. And unfortunately, and I say this very respectfully, there are people who are missing because of stuff like that. you know, they
Quite possibly.
they kidnap. They do actually. A lot of times you'll see, and I'm not going off the deep end here, but you'll see like people who are missing, and then you'll find out that there's an underground body and selling of parts that unfortunately have happened. Particularly in the United States. And you're just like, wow, it's very
Yeah, it's shocking.
yeah. I think that's one of the more fascinating storylines that I've heard in quite some time. To be quite honest with you, I'm kind of stopped in my tracks.
Yeah, well, I hope it's not too gruesome for people that it turns them off. But I think, it deserves to be brought forward
Yeah.
because it exists, and we've seen evidence in the news where different funeral home
Oh
directors
my
across
gosh.
the country,
Yeah.
have been charged and put in jail
Yeah.
because of how they're storing body parts,
Yeah.
how they're cremating people,
Right.
all kinds of things.
It gets really dicey too because you're dealing with universities and museums too, and some things are hundreds of years old, and then there's sensitivity versus cultural preservation. Sometimes things were what happened in the past. It gets really, and I'm not here to make judgment calls on either one of them. It just gets very layered because there's multiple things that were involved when it comes to displays of certain things.
Very true.
It gets very difficult in that regard. I would encourage everybody to listen to your story because it's not often that I get to hear from somebody who's a nurse who went through what you went through and then decided to make a career pivot like that. What encouragement do you have for the listeners of the show to do something like that?
Well, I guess one of the main things that I want to leave with people is the idea of hope and
Yeah.
that you are in charge of your own destiny.
Yes.
So if you are facing challenges, and remember, challenges are temporary, right? Circumstances are temporary, and you have the power to change them. They might feel overwhelming and they might cause you to stop dead in your tracks. But the thing is you have the ability to reinvent yourself if you choose to do that.
Correct.
And so, how I would suggest, based on my own experience, is first of all, allow yourself to dream,
Yes.
allow yourself to use your imagination. And if you could have anything that you wanted, what would that be? And clearly define it. And then every day, take baby steps towards that dream. You don't have to share it with anybody. It can be just embedded in your imagination.
It's
And you
beautiful.
say, one day I am going to be, and just put yourself on a path where you can achieve that.
Yeah.
Now, for me, as an example, I'd written a whole bunch of academic papers as a professional, but writing fiction is a completely different thing. And I was no expert at writing fiction, and I still am no expert at writing fiction.
Yeah.
So, what I did was I went online and I found some courses that were self paced that I could work around my rehab and my exhaustion
Mm-hmm.
and learn some new skills.
Right.
And by learning new skills, that empowered me to try something different.
Yeah.
Now, my goal is to be a best-selling medical author thriller, just like Robin Cook. And I'm coming from a different perspective than he was.
Yeah.
I'm the nurse thriller author.
Yeah.
So create yourself whatever way you want to create yourself. You have the power to do that.
Yeah, and and that's one of the reasons I created a podcast, right? Because I love what you said earlier, where you said, the path has kind of been, sold upon you from birth, right? Hey, go to K through 12, post secondary education, and then your career is going to take you to wherever it takes you, right? And that's supposed to be the top of the mountain of quote unquote happiness and success. Having said all that, and I'm not judging that, right? But if you have a passion, if you have a curiosity, and to your point, like I'm a living, breathing example. It was fine to be curious as a kid, but then when you start like, hey, I really like this. This really kind of triggers me. It keeps me up at night, and really like, and then all of a sudden, as an adult, they're like, dude, like, why are you so excited about a documentary, right? Like hypothetically, but in your heart, you're truly, it really like keeps you up at night because it's all you can think about. And I was like, I can't cook worth of crap. I can't fix cars. I can't wire anything. But I said, I always like to know how things function and operate. And I always just know that random thing that most people would just be like, look at you funny. So then I decided to start a podcast to talk to people like yourself because I thought that my curiosity could be a very valuable tool.
Absolutely. And really the sky's the limit. Like, if you believe that you're a spiritual being having a human experience, then the universe is, you have access to the universe and you have access to everything it has to offer.
Yes.
So use that imagination and find joy. Find something that brings you joy.
Yeah.
I mean, my goodness,
No
we're only
lies.
here for a limited time on this planet.
No lies.
So do something that makes you happy.
Right. And the other thing I'll tell people, as listeners to this show is that, when you decide to follow your passion, you start talking to like-minded people. You start getting in that area where people like yourself talk to other people like, like I don't say like me, but you get in that space. And then the second thing I'll say is that the internet has democratized a lot of things when it comes to taking down barriers, and you don't have to wait to be an author. You don't have to wait. You can go on Kindle, you can go on Etsy, you can go on very different platforms to get your voice heard that 30, 20, 15 years ago, well, I got to stand in line, so to speak, or they make assumptions because of somebody's background. Somebody won't listen to this. The guy that wrote The Martian wrote it online as a blog. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, with technology now, we have access to the world
Mm-hmm.
and it's at our fingertips, literally.
Mm-hmm.
So,
No excuses.
again, dream, don't put restrictions on yourself. Just go for it.
And I got to tell you, what you've survived, what you've come through, and also the people that you've healed, the hands that you've held, the stories that you probably had to cry yourself to sleep at night. I don't think people understand, what your profession goes through, because you guys have to internalize a lot while still actually putting on a good face. It's like a firefighter, a cop, a paramedic. They have to still be a functioning human of the things that they see. And I can only,
Absolutely.
oh my gosh, I can only imagine it. You don't get to say, hey, I had a great day at work after what you might have seen, right? And you still have to take a kid to a baseball game or a soccer
true.
match.
They really don't want to talk at the dinner table about your death.
No. And I sympathize with that. And that takes a powerful person to really, do that for a living, because, people do need care. And I feel like this deserves a second follow-up episode once you start getting the other books, or when the book starts getting real well known. Where can people find Jenny White, your book, your authorship? And I really would love to see this turn into a series, to be quite honest with you.
Well, actually, Hollywood has called, so
Oh!
there might be something down the road. We'll see.
Get a good deal, because I hear horror stories like the author of Forrest Gump got burned. So, please, make sure that you get a good deal. They try to say that stuff doesn't make money, right? Because they do that accounting.
Yeah, well, yeah. No, yeah, I think you have to hire the right people. But anyway, so I do have a website and I would love for you to explore it. I do have a blog and an email list. So the website is www.jennywhite.ca, because I'm out of Canada. Now, do be aware there are a couple of Jenny Whites out there, so make sure you get the right one. I'm the Canadian girl who writes medical thrillers.
Yeah. Well, if anybody heard you say out or about, like, I think that that's the trigger point for people to know that that's a Canadian accent, especially those of us in Michigan who can kind of have a second, sixth sense to that kind of thing. You know, nothing personal. I love Canada.
Yeah, Canada's pretty great.
It,
You got to come and visit.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm there all the time. So I got to tell you, like, this took down a very good winding path. I was absolutely honored that you reached out to me. And you know what? I'm really looking forward to seeing that credit storyboard one day when I'm zooming through one of those streaming services, and I see your name attached to it. This has been an honor and a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
And very much appreciated on the Randomness of Nothing. Jenny White. You guys, everyone listening, get her books, listen to her story, and be inspired from this episode. Take care. I hope that was fun.